October 17th, 2014. Pacific Missile Range Facility, Kauai. The sea is black glass and the wind smells like rain and hot electronics. Inside the Combat Information Center of USS Lake Erie, fluorescent light paints every face the color of ice. You can feel the ship's heartbeat through the deck. Generators humming, cooling fans breathing, consoles ticking like clocks that refuse to be late. Lieutenant Commander Mark Dwyer, New Jersey kid, surface warfare pin polished flat, leans over the Aegis console with a pencil tucked behind his ear. He's not staring at the sweeping arm of a Hollywood radar. He's watching numbers, ranges, bearings, frequencies. The ocean is not empty. It is crowded with mathematics. Track 5525, the operator calls, voice steady. Skin paint, intermittent. Intermittent. The word everyone respects. The range is long, the angle low, and the target, a supersonic surrogate, keeps kissing the curvature of the earth and ducking under the line like a boxer who knows how not to be seen. Outside, rain needles the deck. In the vertical launch cells beneath Dwyer's boots, a family of missiles sleeps in steel cradles. Cold, coiled potential. Someone cleared them hours ago. Someone checked the seals. Someone signed a log that says, in effect, if the Republic asks, we answer. A junior sailor, brand new to the ship, listens to the cadence of voices and learns a truth. This room doesn't shout. When the world accelerates, Americans in gray rooms slow down. Precision is a kind of prayer. The target pops up again, just a breath, then disappears. On another screen, a faint line builds, breaks, rebuilds. You see it? Whispers the tech beside Dwyer. Dwyer doesn't answer. He knows the ocean lies. Ducting bends signals. Sea clutter fakes ghosts. An enemy counts on that. He wants your eyes to chase reflections until your mind runs out of breath. But the Aegis Combat System doesn't get tired. It gets certain. It cross-checks the spy radar with other sensors, massages waveforms, stitches, truth out of noise the way a medic stitches skin, small, tight, without drama. Downrange, technicians at the range control breathe their own kind of quiet. A launch earlier tonight shook the dark, a sleek target cutting a white scar across the water. Then came the trick. Terrain mask, low crawl, the radar signature shaved thin as paper. Someone once laughed in a briefing and called it a ghost with a switch. It can blink, he said. You'll lose it. They stopped laughing when they realized what Aegis was designed to do. Watch when others blink. Dwyer's headset crackles. Recommendation, engage with SM-6. 3 words in that sentence matter. Standard. Missile. 6. It is not just a projectile. It is an argument in metal. A body built for speed. A brain that can listen to the ship. Then, if the ship goes blind, open its own eyes. The old ways asked a destroyer to hold a target by the hand all the way in. The new way teaches the missile to think for itself, to carry the conversation if the radios get crowded or the horizon gets in the way. They brought speed. America brought a network. Set, Dwyer says, and a dozen unseen hands move. In the launcher, 1 canister wakes, the guidance section checking its pulse, power good, umbilicals talking, flight computer waiting for the ship to whisper a name and a direction. The CIC cools by a degree. That's what it feels like when a decision locks. Shoot, shoot. The word is soft, not shouted. And yet the deck kicks like a mule and a cylinder of American intention punches into night. For a half second, the ship is bathed in white. Then the light is a memory chasing itself downrange. Men keep talking, calm as surgeons. Bird away. Time of flight. Mid-course guidance uplink good. You see, most people think a missile is a spear you throw and hope. It isn't. It's a promise you make at Mach 3. The ship promises to tell the missile where the world is. The missile promises to listen. until it no longer needs to. Hours ago, in a cooler sea, they rehearsed that handoff, ship to seeker, seeker to ship, like a string quartet trading melody. Tonight, there is no rehearsal. Tonight, there is only the blink and the answer. Halfway to the horizon, the SM-6 rides a column of mathematics. Data uplinks stitch through the sky. The target blinks again, drops off, comes back wrong, tries to confuse the picture with reflections and speed. The missile does not care. It hears the ship's last good truth, then opens its own eyes. An active seeker wakes, small, precise, unblinking. Somewhere in that black dome is a sliver of radar that stops asking permission and starts asking questions. Are you metal? Are you moving? Are you the shape the ocean has been trying to hide? Seeker active, a voice says, barely above a whisper. The room doesn't cheer. No one does a fist pump. Dwyer just tightens his jaw. In some bar, years from now, he might describe this moment as a click, a gentle nudge in the spine. The instant responsibility leaves the ship and sits on the nose of a weapon designed by people who believed in second chances for the first shot. On a screen the size of a book, a line thickens, then ends. Splash. One syllable, no drama. Somewhere far ahead, there is light none of these men will see, and foam that will be gone before the rain returns. The target that could blink has run out of tricks. The sea looks the same. It always does. But in this room, the air feels new. The young sailor lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Dwyer removes the pencil from behind his ear and writes 3 neat letters in his log, the way sailors have done since sails and cannon, because history respects handwriting. They laughed at the idea of a missile that could make up its mind. They stopped laughing when the ocean tried to hide the threat, and the missile kept looking anyway. For Dwyer, it isn't just another test card. It's a promise kept. If the Republic asks, we answer. Quietly, completely. The story didn't begin on a quiet night off Kauai. It began in a noisier age, Cold War water, where navies imagined skyfuls of arrows coming at carriers from every quarter at once. Admirals feared a word that sounded like weather, saturation. Too many threats for too few hands. Somewhere in that anxiety, engineers proposed a heresy for its time. What if the ship didn't point and shoot one console at a time? What if it thought? Not like a person with a joystick, but like a conductor, hearing every instrument at once and deciding who plays next. They named that conductor Aegis, the shield of a mythic god. But the truth was simpler. It was the first time a warship treated the sky as an equation. They laughed at it at first, not openly, never to a Navy captain's face, but the scoffs were there. A computer can't see sea clutter, someone said. Radars lose targets, men hold them. What they didn't understand was that Aegis was not a radar. The big, flat faces on the superstructure, those SPY arrays, were eyes, yes, but the combat system behind them was a mind. Signals flowed in like rain into gutters. The system sorted, correlated, promoted, and killed, on paper at first, then in steel. Ticonderoga-class cruisers took it to sea. Arleigh Burke destroyers made it a birthright, and a generation of sailors learned to trust sentences that began with "system recommends." You see, before Aegis, the ship had to babysit a missile all the way to impact. Semi-active homing demanded a spotlight of energy on the target, a radar beam the missile could ride like a wire. It was heroic in a way. One weapon officer, one illuminator, one threat. Duels repeated at the speed of fear. But war is rude. Threats don't wait in line. So the Navy started building a family of answers with a boring name that hides poetry. Standard Missile. SM-1 and SM-2 learned to take mid-course guidance, to fly most of the way on ship-fed truth, then drop into terminal attack when an illuminator finally crowned the target. It made the duel faster. It did not make the system free. Then came two revelations, one from the sky and one from the sea. From the sky, stealthier threats in dirtier environments, wilder flight profiles that colored inside no one's lines. From the sea, the horizon itself, the oldest enemy, still cut the ship's eyes in half. A target that skimmed the surface could hide under the world. A target that blinked, could ask your radar a question and run while you were answering. The ship needed more than a better flashlight. It needed a missile that could see on its own. That's where SM-6 enters. Not as a replacement for everything, but as the grown child of a long, stubborn lineage. Someone took the brains of a proven air-to-air seeker, the kind that makes fighter pilots smile, and married it to a naval body built for reach and for the rough life of steel decks and salty air. They gave it ears to hear the ship for as long as talking was good. They also gave it the right to stop listening and look. Active terminal homing, they called it. To sailors, it meant this: if the picture gets noisy or the earth gets in the way, the missile will carry the argument the last miles by itself. There was another misunderstanding that deserved to die. Critics called Aegis a wall, fixed, strong, but alone. The truth was quieter and more dangerous. Aegis was always a neighborhood. The cooperative engagement dream, first sketch on paper, then boxes wired to boxes, then real antennas throwing quiet threads through the air, promised that one ship could shoot what another ship, or an aircraft, or a hovering eye far over the water could see. They brought platforms. America brought a conversation. In briefings, it sounded like jargon. At sea, it sounded like survival. If your horizon is blind, borrow mine. If my illuminator is busy, lend yours. If neither of us can stare long enough, then teach the missile to open its own eyes and finish the sentence. Of course, there were rolled eyes. Too much autonomy, some said. You'll launch into ghosts. That's why the Navy sweated the math, why testers chased ducting nights and surface bounce days, why sailors like Dwyer learned to mistrust drama and romance the word certain. They stacked trials in ranges where the wind has a personality and the waves have opinions. They let missiles miss, then asked them why, then fixed what the missile told them. The public saw the press release. The fleet saw the logbooks. Failure wasn't a verdict. It was a note from the future. And in the background, the factory line grew its own kind of patience. A body this long, with skin this smooth and veins wired for whispering, doesn't roll off a table by accident. It is torqued to spec and clocked to secrets. The seeker head, small, polite, sits like a brain behind a glass that must never fog, never fracture, never lie. The canister is a coffin until it becomes a cradle. You can smell the resin and the solvent, feel the clean room chill on your knuckles. Somewhere, a woman in safety glasses aligns a connector that will carry a ship's last good truth across a night like the one off Kauai. She isn't thinking of speeches. She is thinking of pins, seals, torque. So when people say, "Wasn't Aegis born for ballistic missiles?" you can smile. The system learned that problem too. It learned to swat stones thrown from the stratosphere. But tonight's legend isn't about stones. It's about a blade that pretends to be missed. The misunderstanding is simple. They thought we built a wall. We built a web. And in that web is a hunter that doesn't blink when the target does. They brought speed, altitude, angles. America brought order, patience, and a missile that knows when to listen and when to look. That's the origin. That's the promise. And somewhere in a gray room, the next young sailor is learning to trust a quiet sentence that begins with, "System recommends." They didn't hand the fleet a miracle in a can and call it done. They dragged the idea through salt and shame until it learned to breathe underwater. The first trials felt like midnight labs with the ocean as a co-conspirator. Range crews painted the sea with targets that lied for a living. Low flyers that ducked into clutter, ramblers that jinked just to embarrass your math, darts that flashed a signature and then wore silence like armor. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors rehearsed the quiet choreography. Detect, decide, launch, guide, then let go. On paper, the handoff from ship to seeker was elegant. In wind and rain, it was a knife's edge measured in split seconds and salt. You see, a blink is not magic. It's physics with bad manners. At hugging height, a target borrows the sea's noise and sells it back to your radar. Ducting keeps energy skimming along the warm, cool seams of air, then dumps it where you don't expect. On some afternoons, the ocean looks like steel. On others, it's a factory of false positives. The first times SM-6 chased such creatures, the timeline felt wrong. The ship's uplink gave the missile a best guess, and the missile ran with it, fast, obedient, almost too trusting. Then, as the target dipped, the picture got greasy. The seeker woke a breath too late, or looked a hair too high, or believed a stronger echo that wasn't the thing trying to kill you. In the logbook that reads as one word, miss. No one cheered for that, but no one panicked either. Failure wasn't a verdict. It was a note from the future. Engineers in polos and sailors in coveralls crowded around plots that looked like EKGs. They rewound the moment the uplink paused and the seeker blinked open. They argued over milliseconds you could not feel on your skin. Earlier handoff, someone said, and a lieutenant drew a box on the whiteboard. No, a civilian answered. Smarter handoff. Context. The truth was simple and hard. You didn't want the missile to open its eyes too soon and chase phantoms, or too late and let the blade slide past your ribs. You wanted it to understand now. So they taught the system manners. The ship learned to send not just positions, but intentions, vectors with histories, probabilities with teeth. The missile learned to weigh a whisper from the hull against the first taste of truth in its own antenna. Range days lengthened. Weather turned range crews into philosophers. They launched in crosswinds that slapped your cheeks and on glassy mornings that tricked the horizon flat. They heated canisters until gaskets begged for mercy, then chilled seekers until the glass could taste winter. They bolted canisters into bays that smelled like ozone and safety paint, then hoisted everything into a world that smelled like kelp and burned coffee. In parallel, a different sort of trial ran the red line: electronic warfare. A blink doesn't only come from earth and air. It can come from a clever transmitter that wants you to look left while the knife slides in from the right. So the testers let the enemy speak, simulators jabbering with the rhythms of real deceivers. Some nights the missile, still young, listened to the loudest voice. Later nights it learned to privilege the right voice. Inside the cone of its seeker, filters hardened. In the ship's software, consistency checks got teeth. It stopped being impressed by volume. It started demanding coherence. Sailors had their own lessons to learn. Aegis will recommend. Humans must consent. Early on, watch teams overcoached, adding illumination they didn't need, crowding the radio net with words that felt helpful and were not. The best crews learned to let the system breathe. They cut syllables. They trusted the rhythm. Bird away. Mid-course good. Seeker active. Splash. And on days when it wasn't splash, when the ocean won another small skirmish, they didn't blame the ocean. They blamed assumptions. Assumptions are the enemy that sleeps under your pillow. There was a day, ask the men and they'll nod, when the revelation felt like a pin dropping in a crowded room. The shot wasn't dramatic. Nothing on a good ship is. The target did its routine: skim, flash, duck. The ship did its part: uplink, sanity check, guidance. Then the missile, still far from anyone's eyes, opened its own. Not early, not late. Right. The seeker painted the world, rejected the screamers, and settled on a track that wore truth like a uniform. In the CIC, no one smiled. They watched the numbers thicken. Seeker lock, someone said. And it wasn't the word so much as the way the sentence fell, like a gate closing on a hand. A few heartbeats later, splash. Not a cheer, a confirmation. What they didn't know, those who mocked autonomy in briefing rooms far from salt, was that the revelation wasn't a single shot. It was repetition. Do it again. Change the wind. Change the duct. Change the profile. Staple success to boredom so tightly that boredom becomes a kind of courage. The missile that blinked now blinked on purpose, closing its eyes to lies, opening them to what mattered. The ship that once wanted to hold the beam all the way in learned to let go sooner and became more dangerous because of it. And out there in the factories, Revelation wore a different uniform. A woman with a torque wrench tightened the ring that keeps weather outside and truth inside. A man in a lab coat signed a sticker that meant the glass would not fog when the ocean tried to reach in with cold fingers. A pallet rolled toward a truck rolled toward a pier. A crate slid into a cell that would cradle it until someone with calm hands and a headset said the softest loud word in the English language, shoot. They brought tricks, jammers, angles, and the oldest ally of confusion, the horizon. America brought a patient cruelty, test, fail, fix, repeat, until the handoff was not a gamble, but a grace note. That is how the revelation arrives at sea, not as trumpets, as competence. They don't circle dates on calendars for moments like this. They don't hang banners in combat. They just log the time and the bearing and the sea state, because history at sea prefers to be written in numbers first. Dawn is a rumor to the east, a thin gray seam where night is stitched to water. The ship rides easy but alert, antennas awake, watchstanders leaning into the hush that comes before a decision. Mark Dwyer is back at the console, older by drills that felt like years and by years that felt like minutes. He knows the smell in the room, ozone, coffee, wet canvas, and the copper tang of focus. The first report doesn't sound like danger. It sounds like weather. An aircraft far off sees something that isn't cloud. A merchantman calls a bearing for a light that doesn't act like a lighthouse. A satellite's whisper tips a line a hair thicker on a classified screen. None of it is dramatic on its own, but in the web America built, hints are not orphans. They are cousins looking for a family. Aegis takes them in, tracks bud and branch. The watch team does not use the word threat yet. They say the words that matter more. Consistent, coherent, closing. You see, a duel used to begin when two weapons stared at each other. In a system, combat begins when the picture hardens, when maybes dry into is. The target is low and quick, married to the sea to steal your range, using the earth like a cloak thrown just so. It blinks. The line on Dwyer's scope hiccups, resets, grows again. The old temptation rises, the urge to stare harder, to throw more energy, to try to hold the thing in your hands. He lets it pass. The system knows the shape now. It knows the habits this kind of machine has when it breathes. The recommendation appears like a polite knock. Engage, SM-6. There is a second between recommendation and consent where a ship reveals what it has become. Is it a museum of heroics or a factory of results? Dwyer glances across the plot, listens for the rhythm, the clipped voices, the clean readbacks, the absence of theatrical words. In that small silence, he feels the weight of all those range nights, of all the misses that were mileposts, of a missile that learned when to open its eyes. Engage, he says, and the room moves as if it had been waiting its whole life to do nothing else. The canister's hatch kicks. Fire blossoms and is gone. The standard punches up and away, a straight line drawn with a steel pencil across a sky that has not decided what color it wants to be. Bird away. The uplink is clean. The ship hands the missile a living map of a target that keeps trying to redraw its borders. Far downrange, the blade in the waves kisses a duct and slips under, then hops back up like a thief checking a window. Once upon a time, That would have been the moment to pray. Tonight, it is the moment to trust design. Mid-course is a conversation. Terminal is a confession. The missile stops asking the ship what the world looks like and asks the world directly. The seeker wakes. It has heard jammers shout. It has seen horizons lie. It has learned to be unimpressed by ghosts. It paints and repaints and throws away the wrong answers. In combat, someone breathes out on the mic, just air, just a human reminding himself he has lungs. Seeker active. The sentence lands without ripple. They don't need to believe. They've rehearsed belief into habit. There is no chorus when metal meets math. There is a twitch in the line, a bright fleck on a remote screen, and a word that sounds like a pebble dropped in a bucket. Splash. The operator does not look up. The captain does not smile. The ship does what victorious ships have always done. It checks again. Q radar. ESM. The off-board eye. The merchantman who had no words for what he saw, but knows a horizon when it changes. The picture clears the way a window clears after breath fades. Nothing else is closing. The room warms by a degree. Somewhere beyond that horizon, men who believed in the trick, who counted on the blink and the low crawl and the cluttered mercy of the sea, learn a new math. They learn that a missile can hold a truth in its nose and carry it across the last dirty miles without help. They learn that the ocean is no longer a hiding place, only a delay. They learn it in the oldest language of war, silence where a weapon was supposed to be. They had brought speed and nerves and the comfort of Earth's curve. America had brought a conversation and a seeker that did not care about comfort. On board, the lessons are quieter, and they come with pencils. The log is neat. The debrief is clinical. A petty officer who never liked the word autonomy nods without realizing it when the timeline slides into place and the last seconds look like a seam laid by a careful hand. Dwyer writes the coordinates once, then again, as if underlining a thought he will not speak. You don't gloat in rooms like this. You don't advertise competence. You stack it, box it, and stow it where the next watch can reach it in the dark. Afterward, in a space small enough to remind you that warships are dens before they are palaces, someone pours coffee thick as honesty. The junior sailor from that night off Kauai is not so junior now. He stares at the paper where the chalk talk turns into muscle memory. We let go early, he says, half question. We let go on time, Dwyer answers, and the difference is a doctrine, not a quip. Most people think victory is a loud thing. It isn't. It's a series of quiet decisions made at the right speed. Word moves at sea the way it always has, through rumor and respect. A petty officer writes home and doesn't say what happened, only that the system worked like the brochure, and better than the brochure could say. In another ocean, on another watch, a different captain looks at his plot and feels a small knot loosen behind his ribs. He does not want a duel. He wants an answer. And now he has a weapon that knows how to give one without asking his horizon's permission. They laughed at the notion that a missile could finish the conversation alone. They stopped laughing when the sea tried to run interference and the seeker refused to be distracted. For the enemy, realization arrived as absence. For the ship, it arrived as procedure. And for a nation that builds promises out of wires and will, it arrived the way good news should, logged, confirmed, and ready to be repeated. Power at sea doesn't begin at sea. It begins where concrete floors shine with wax and safety paint, where torque wrenches click like metronomes, where a line of canisters waits like piano keys. In Tucson and Camden, in Louisville and on the Gulf Coast, the Standard Missile family grows the way America prefers to grow things, methodically, boringly, relentlessly. Boredom is a compliment on these floors. Every seal seated, every connector clocked, every serial number married to a test result that will outlive the man who signed it. Somewhere there is a glass window where a visitor presses his fingertips and whispers, "That's it?" He expected drama. He doesn't understand that drama is the sound of a system that failed to plan. You see, the secret isn't a single wonder weapon. It's a family raised in a neighborhood. The canister that cradles SM-6 is the same rectangle of confidence that cradles other standards. That means ships do not relearn how to be ships when a new missile arrives. VLS cells do not care which child they are asked to launch. They care that the ask is correct. Common hardware, common software hooks, training syllabi with fewer forks, a deck crew that can do the dance at night in rain without thinking. They brought exotic gadgets. America brought an interface. Behind the steel is software, dull to hear about, beautiful to own. Baseline by baseline, Aegis grows new synapses. Crews see it as colored tracks and cleaner prompts. Engineers see it as code that remembers failures and refuses to repeat them. A radar learns to treat a blinking echo like a problem to be graded, not a ghost to be chased. A fire control loop sheds milliseconds the way a racer sheds ounces. And out in the desert and over blue water, the cooperative engagement rails hum, boxes talking to boxes across ships and aircraft and off-board eyes, slinging truth at the speed of duty. The first time a ship shoots a weapon guided by a picture she did not paint alone, the captain feels his ship get bigger without growing an inch. Factories carry that picture as surely as cruisers do. In one building, a seeker head goes through a ritual that looks like superstition and is actually science. Heat, cold, vibration, silence. Then a bath of noise as bright as any enemy will manage. It passes or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it isn't scolded. It is interrogated. In another building, men and women in gray smocks protect a kind of purity. Electrostatic straps, lint-free breath. The missile's brain must be picky forever, so the room is picky now. Out at sea, sailors will call it good glass. In the plant, they call it within tolerance, and the phrase lands like a hymn. Supremacy isn't just factories and code, it is schoolhouses and schedules. The fleet does not receive a tool and improvise, it receives a syllabus, a doctrine, a calendar. In Dahlgren and San Diego, in Mayport and Pearl, watch officers walk their eyes through films of ducts and ducts of lies, learning what radar looks like when it is being told a story by weather. Weapons officers run the AAW ballet until their tongues know the words: detect, decide, assign, engage, assess. War games test the manners out of assumptions. The best trick in the book, mass, arrives on purpose. More threats than a human can sort, fed to a system that does not mind sorting. Crews emerge not cocky, but unstartled. Unstartled is the American luxury these days. Allies fold in, not as ornaments, but as organs. A British hull carries a sensor a U.S. destroyer respects. A Japanese ship rides a doctrine that harmonizes without translation. An Australian radar sends a truth an American missile will accept. The sea does not care what flag you paint on steel. It cares that your data makes sense. Interoperability isn't a handshake at a pier. It is a sentence that completes itself across time zones. Somewhere in a ready room, a young officer sees a foreign track pop onto his American scope and does not blink. That is how systems become empires without colonies. There is a ledger, too, the one the taxpayer deserves. SM-6 is not cheap. Competence rarely is. But the Navy buys more than a single trick with each round. Air-breathing threats? Check. Cruise missiles that hug the sea like cowards? Check. Ballistic nastiness plunging down from the rude heights? There are configurations that answer. A surface target that needs to be reminded the ocean is not a shield? There are tactics for that, approved by people who do not blush when they say the word lethality. One body, many uses. One inventory, smaller piles. Logistics smiles when versatility walks in the room. Sustainment, The least glamorous word in war wins wars. Spare seekers sit like promise on controlled shelves. Firmware patches travel on guarded cables and arrive with checklists that make chiefs happy. A destroyed part becomes a diagnosis. A diagnosis becomes a fix. A fix becomes a field change. And the next ship never sees the flaw. The ordnance men who sign for canisters know the pact. You take care of the weapon. The weapon takes care of you. In places where the world's map has too much red ink, that pact is not poetry. It is oxygen. Doctrine hardens to habit, and habit frees attention for the part of combat that is still art. Captains rediscover an old piece. They do not have to be clever at the last second if they were disciplined in the last year. Testing writes the outlines, training colors inside the lines. Industry keeps the crayons sharp. The result is not a single night off Kauai or a single dawn where the horizon learned manners. The result is repeatability, the right kind of boredom, the kind that terrifies the men who thought tricks would carry their day. They brought surprises. America brought standards. Somewhere in a plant, a pallet rolls. Somewhere in a schoolhouse, a student nods. Somewhere at sea, a watch is relieved. The web tightens without becoming brittle. The hunter sharpens without becoming vain. Industrial power is not the roar of a furnace. It is the hum of a culture that prefers competence to spectacle. And supremacy is not an adjective. It is a schedule kept. They laughed at the idea that an ocean could be ordered. They stopped laughing when they learned we don't order oceans. We order ourselves, and the ocean follows. After nights like these, the ocean never tells. The same swells roll, the same birds hunt, the same horizon pretends to be innocent. Only the paperwork changes. Ink, drying on lines where men sign their names to moments they will never fully describe. The ship's wake closes behind her as if to erase evidence. Inside, compartments hum with the old rhythms, galley clatter, shaft whine, the gossip of pipes. But there is a new quiet in the crew, a deeper kind, the kind that comes when you've taken an exam the world wrote for you and you know, without needing to brag, that you passed. Mark Dwyer sleeps in a rack that isn't long enough for anybody's dreams and wakes to the smell of coffee, older than some sailors on board. He does what sea officers have done since canvas, walks the deck at dawn to let the day set its terms. The water looks like hammered tin. The ship throws her shoulder into a small sea and doesn't complain. He tastes salt in the air and something like electricity, the leftover tang of last night's math. A bosun's mate pipes a call, and on the far beam a rain squall draws a gray curtain across a part of the world that is none of his business. He nods to himself. The sea remains the sea. Our obligation remains to be ready. You see, victory in old stories wore laurel and brass bands. Victory at sea, now, wears competence. It wears the ritual of maintenance, panels opened, connectors inspected, seekers checked by hands that know where fragility hides. It wears the boredom of reports that say, as expected, and the relief that follows. An SM-6 goes back into its steel cradle the way a violin goes into a velvet case, wiped, tested, respected. Aegis runs built-in tests that would bore a poet and thrill an engineer. The watch fires up, not with speeches, but with the right call signs spoken in the right order by people who, given a choice, would rather be good than dramatic. News does not travel the way it used to, clattering across telegraph or shouted by boys on bicycles. It moves as rumor in mess decks, as a single sentence in a captain's brief, as a number buried in a report that will outlast administrations. Somewhere ashore, a staff officer reads a line: intercept successful, seeker active, splash confirmed, and the line lands like a weight removed from the chest. He slips the paper into a folder marked routine, because that is how you honor the men who made routine out of terror. Enemies take their own measure in their own mirror. They won't admit it out loud. They will change their pamphlets. adjust their timelines, add new slides to old presentations. They will give fancy names to evasions that are not new. They will ask the Earth to hide them better. The Earth will say no, not always. Not when a seeker that knows the difference between noise and intent is waiting downrange. They brought speed, angles, and the old religion of clutter. America brought a conversation, and the conversation is getting louder. The aftermath we can speak about is the one at home. In plants where floors shine like promises, the line keeps moving, steady, not frantic. In schoolhouses where the air smells like dry marker and ambition, the syllabi change by commas. Chiefs remind new watchstanders that a system is a covenant. You will be humble before complexity, and the system will be faithful when the hard second arrives. In living rooms across the zip codes where rivers were tamed and towers raised, a mother asks her son what he does on that ship. He says, "I listen, I decide, I launch if we must." She nods like a woman who once riveted aluminum, while the radio hummed Glenn Miller. The decades shake hands. Most people think technology makes us colder. It doesn't. It forces us to be honest. A seeker cannot love you out of a mistake. A radar won't forgive your laziness. An interface won't rescue you from indiscipline. If you want a missile to carry your promise into the last dirty miles, you must earn its obedience with checklists and patience. The human inside the loop is not less important now. He is more so, because he is the one who decides to trust what he built. That is a moral act, not a mechanical one. There are monuments you can touch, granite with names, bronze with horses, and there are monuments you can only hear. The hum in a combat information center at 0300 is a monument. The click of a torque wrench in a clean room is a monument. A pencil line in a logbook, the kind you draw twice because you want the digits to appear as neat as the truth they record. That too is a monument. We are a nation that builds cathedrals out of steel and software, then asks them to sing not hymns, but probabilities. It takes a special kind of faith to believe in math enough to stake lives on it. We teach that faith in schoolhouses. We prove it in rain. When historians look back, and they will, because the sea always writes the best chapters, they will say the age of smart weapons began when we stopped worshiping gadgets and started practicing systems. They will note that we built hunters that could make up their minds, but only after we made up ours about discipline. They will see that we did not banish fear, we learned to schedule it, and they will know, if they have ears, that the quiet after splash is the sound of a republic keeping a promise without asking for applause. Dwyer will go ashore someday, trade steel decks for carpet, and the ocean's grammar for his children's laughter. He will keep a notebook he never shows anyone. On one page, a date and a bearing and a weather note never quite leave him alone. He will not tell stories. He will just fix things around the house with the same patience he once offered a stubborn system at sea. When the rain comes hard, he will step outside and breathe and feel, for a moment, the way the world pauses just before a decision, and he will be grateful that men and women he will never meet are somewhere out there, keeping the conversation alive. They mocked a missile that could choose. They forgot what choice means when your compass is duty. America did not build a weapon. It built a way to be sure. And somewhere in the silence after victory, freedom took a breath.